How a fifth-dimensional being sees you changed the fate of the entire galaxy. Have you ever wondered whether the universe is far stranger than it appears? Right now, you experience the world in 3 dimensions: length, width, and height. Combined with time, physicists describe our everyday reality as 4-dimensional spacetime, a concept established by Einstein's theory of relativity. Every object you've ever touched, every planet, every star, and every galaxy exists within this framework. But for decades, some areas of theoretical physics have explored a fascinating possibility. What if there are more dimensions? The idea isn't science fiction alone. Several mathematical frameworks, including versions of string theory and M-theory, propose that our universe may contain additional spatial dimensions beyond the ones we can directly perceive. In many of these models, the extra dimensions would be incredibly small or curled up, making them impossible to observe with today's instruments. So far, no experiment has confirmed that these extra dimensions exist. But the mathematics allows for the possibility. Now imagine something extraordinary. Imagine that somewhere in the universe, evolution followed a path unlike anything on Earth. Instead of developing senses limited to 3-dimensional space, an ancient intelligence evolved to perceive every dimension at once. To such a being, our entire lives would appear very differently. A 2-dimensional creature living on a sheet of paper would only see a circle if a sphere passed through its world. It could never comprehend the complete object. Likewise, if higher dimensions exist, perhaps humans only perceive tiny slices of a much larger reality. What if a 5th-dimensional observer could see your entire existence? Not just where you are, but every moment of your life woven together across space and time. What would a galaxy look like from that perspective? Would planets seem like isolated worlds? Or would every civilization appear connected by invisible structures extending through dimensions humanity has never discovered? These questions remain entirely speculative. Modern science has no evidence that conscious 5th-dimensional beings exist. Yet thought experiments like these have helped physicists and mathematicians visualize higher dimensional geometry for decades. Now, let's imagine that one of those beings is real. Not as magic, not as a god, but as a civilization so advanced that its perception extends into dimensions humanity has only described with equations. For millions of years, civilizations across the Milky Way believed they understood the universe. They mastered faster-than-light travel, harnessed the energy of stars, built cities around black holes, mapped nearly every habitable system in the galaxy. Their instruments detected gravity waves, dark matter distributions, neutron star collisions, and planets thousands of light-years away. They believed there was nothing left to surprise them. Until one observation station detected an anomaly that no known law of physics could explain. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a signal. It wasn't even energy. It was perspective. Every telescope looking toward the same region of space reported different images. Some observed a massive luminous sphere. Others detected an impossible lattice of glowing geometry. Several observatories recorded nothing at all. The instruments were functioning perfectly. The universe was not. For the first time in recorded galactic history, scientists from hundreds of civilizations reached the same conclusion. Whatever they were observing could not be fully represented within 3-dimensional space. And then it moved. Not through space, but through reality itself. What happened next would forever change the galaxy's understanding of intelligence, and eventually reveal why humanity was unlike any other species that had ever lived. The first reports were dismissed as equipment failures. That was the standard procedure whenever observations violated established physics. Radio interference, software bugs, cosmic rays striking detectors, astronomy had encountered them all before. But this time was different. Within 72 hours, more than 18,000 independent observatories across known space reported the same anomaly. No 2 observatories produced identical images. Yet every calculation pointed to the same coordinates. Scientists faced a paradox. How could different instruments observing the same location all be correct? The answer, if there was one, seemed to lie in geometry rather than technology. Long before humanity became spacefaring, mathematicians on Earth had explored objects impossible to visualize directly. A cube exists naturally in 3 dimensions. Extend the same mathematical logic into a 4th spatial dimension, and the result is a shape called a tesseract, sometimes referred to as a 4-dimensional hypercube. We cannot truly see a tesseract. We can only draw lower dimensional projections of it, much like a shadow on a wall. In exactly the same way, theoretical physicists have argued that if higher dimensional objects existed, observers confined to 3 dimensions might only perceive changing slices or projections of those objects. This idea remains theoretical. No experiment has confirmed the existence of higher dimensional beings or structures, but the mathematics is internally consistent. Across the galaxy, researchers reached an unsettling possibility. Perhaps every observatory was seeing a different projection of the same object. If true, the anomaly wasn't changing shape. Their perspective was. The implications were staggering. It meant the object itself could extend beyond ordinary 3-dimensional space. The Galactic Science Directorate assembled the greatest scientific expedition in history. Rather than sending soldiers, they sent physicists, mathematicians, astronomers, engineers, and experts in gravitational theory. Their mission was simple: observe, measure, do not interfere. As the expedition approached the anomaly, every instrument behaved strangely. Atomic clocks, normally accurate to less than a billionth of a second, began drifting apart. Laser interferometers detected minute distortions unlike any known gravitational wave. Quantum communication systems, usually instantaneous across vast distances, experienced delays that varied depending on the orientation of the spacecraft. None of these effects violated physics completely. Instead, they hinted that the crew was entering a region where their current understanding of space was incomplete. Lead scientist Dr. Saris reviewed the incoming data. "The equations still work," she said quietly. "They're just missing variables." No one spoke. Every researcher understood what she meant. Sometimes a scientific theory fails because it is wrong. Other times, it fails because reality is larger than the theory itself. Then something extraordinary happened. The anomaly acknowledged them. Not through sound, not through light, not through radio transmission. Every member of the expedition suddenly perceived an elegant geometric pattern that seemed to exist directly within their minds. The pattern contained no language. Yet every scientist interpreted the same meaning. You perceive only sections. The message lasted less than a second. Then it disappeared. The recording devices captured nothing. Brain scans showed synchronized neural activity among every observer, but no known mechanism explained how the experience had occurred. Back on Earth, human researchers received copies of the expedition's data. Unlike many civilizations, humanity had a long history of combining mathematics, philosophy, engineering, and experimental science when confronting difficult questions. The anomaly quickly became the focus of thousands of research groups. Some searched for new physical explanations. Others compared the observations with decades-old theoretical work on higher dimensions, quantum gravity, and space-time topology. Most expected the mystery to remain unsolved for centuries. One team noticed something everyone else had overlooked. The geometric pattern transmitted by the anomaly contained ratios that appeared repeatedly throughout nature. Orbital resonances, wave harmonics, symmetry groups, even certain equations describing spacetime curvature. It was as if the message had been built using mathematics itself as a universal language. If that interpretation was correct, the anomaly wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was trying to communicate in the one language every intelligent civilization could eventually understand. And hidden inside that mathematical message was a sequence no alien civilization could decode. Only humanity recognized it. Not because humans were more intelligent, but because of a unique line of mathematical research developed centuries earlier on Earth. For reasons no one could yet explain, human mathematics had taken a path that the rest of the galaxy never explored. That discovery would become the first clue that humanity's role in the universe was far greater than anyone had imagined. The discovery should not have been possible. Across the galaxy, civilizations had access to unimaginable computational power. Quantum lattice processors the size of moons. Neural superclusters capable of simulating entire star systems in real time. Mathematical archives older than most solar systems. And yet, none of them could decode the final layer of the anomaly's message. Except humanity. On Earth, the response began in an unremarkable university lab. Dr. Elira Madsen wasn't trying to solve alien communication. She was studying abstract topology, specifically a niche branch of mathematics called non-orientable manifolds and recursive frame systems, originally developed as a theoretical exercise in modeling impossible surfaces. It had no practical application. At least, that was the assumption for decades. Until the data from deep space arrived. When Madsen overlaid the alien geometric signal onto Earth's mathematical frameworks, something unusual happened. The patterns didn't just match. They completed each other. As if the alien structure and human theory were two halves of the same equation developed independently in different parts of the universe. Her team ran the comparison again. Then again. Then on 3 separate computational systems. The result never changed. The alien signal contained a recursive structure that aligned perfectly with a mathematical concept humanity had only recently begun exploring: observer-dependent dimensional projection. In simpler terms, it suggested that reality might not be fixed in 3 dimensions, but instead, dependent on the level of perception of the observer. Most civilizations in the galaxy had assumed dimensions were absolute. Length, width, height, time. 4 variables describing one universe. But humanity's fringe mathematical models had entertained a different idea. What if dimensions are not fixed properties of reality, but layers that unfold depending on how reality is observed? It was an idea considered too abstract to test. Until now. Because the alien signal didn't just describe higher dimensions. It described how to shift between them. The Galactic Science Directorate dismissed the claim immediately. Impossible interpretation, they said. Pattern matching bias. But they could not explain the anomaly in communication systems. Every attempt to filter the signal produced side effects. Computers began predicting outputs before calculations finished. Data streams reorganized themselves into more efficient forms. Even encrypted military channels briefly revealed information they should not have been able to access. Something about the signal was not just being received. It was being understood by reality itself. And then came the second anomaly. A section of space near the observation fleet began behaving inconsistently. Ships reported that distances were no longer stable. One vessel calculated it was 1.2 million kilometers from the anomaly. Another, only 400,000. Both readings were correct within their own frames of reference. Dr. Saris, still leading the expedition, made a decision that would later be studied in every academy across the galaxy. She ordered a direct probe transmission. No weapons. No propulsion. Just a simple autonomous capsule designed to drift into the anomaly and report back. The capsule crossed the boundary. And for exactly 0.7 seconds, every instrument in the fleet synchronized. For the first time, they all observed the same thing. Not a structure. Not a ship. Not even a physical object. But a field of probability collapsing into interpretation. Every observer described it differently afterward. Some saw fractal light. Some saw impossible angles folding into themselves. Some saw nothing at all. But all reports agreed on one thing. The capsule did not enter the anomaly. It was rewritten by it. When the transmission returned, it contained a single dataset. Not corrupted. Not encrypted, just complete. Inside it was a coordinate system that did not map space. It mapped possibility. And at the center of that system was a marker labeled in a format no known language should have been able to encode. Observed class, human. For the first time since the expedition began, silence fell across every command deck in the fleet. Because if the interpretation was correct, then humanity had not simply detected something in space. Something in higher dimensional reality had detected them first. After the designation appeared in the data stream, every attempt to continue analysis stopped being scientific in the traditional sense. It became personal. Because the coordinate system recovered from the probe wasn't just a map, it was adaptive. Each time a civilization tried to interpret it, the structure changed slightly, as if it were responding to the observer's method of thinking. This behavior matched no known physical model. Not gravitational. Not quantum. Not electromagnetic. It behaved like information that actively restructured itself depending on the mind analyzing it. Across the Galactic Science Directorate, debates intensified. Some argued the system was simply too complex for current mathematics. Others suggested a new category of physics was required, something beyond spacetime itself, possibly involving observer-dependent geometry. A small group of researchers made a more disturbing claim. The system is not being analyzed. It is analyzing us. That statement was initially rejected as philosophical speculation, until Earth issued its second breakthrough. On Earth, Dr. Alira Madson's team ran simulations using humanity's distributed supercomputing network, systems far less powerful than galactic-scale processors, but uniquely structured due to human computational architecture. They noticed something the alien systems missed. Whenever humans interacted with the dataset, prediction errors decreased. Not gradually, instantly, as if the system was already optimized for human interpretation. One graduate researcher, exhausted after 72 hours of continuous analysis, noticed a pattern hidden in the coordinate structure. It wasn't a location. It was a transformation rule. A mathematical function describing how a system behaves when the observer changes dimensional perspective. When applied to test data, the function produced an impossible result. A stable conversion between three-dimensional and higher-dimensional representations of spacetime curvature. In theory, such a conversion should not exist. But the simulation stabilized anyway. Back in orbit near the anomaly, the expedition fleet detected something even more alarming. The anomaly was expanding. Not physically, not in measurable space, but in reference frame coverage. Ships farther away began reporting the same distortions previously only experienced at the boundary zone. It was as if the region of altered reality was no longer localized. It was spreading through observation itself. Dr. Saris ordered a full containment protocol. Every ship was instructed to shut down external sensor arrays and rely only on internal inertial navigation. The goal was simple: isolate perception from the anomaly. But it was already too late. Because the anomaly was no longer dependent on direct observation. It was now embedded in recorded data. Every image, every telemetry packet, every memory buffer containing the signal began to subtly change. Not corruption. Not noise. But refinement. Compression into patterns easier for the human brain to process. And then came the transmission that changed everything. It did not arrive through communication channels. It appeared simultaneously in every system capable of storing data. Military networks, scientific archives, civilian recorders, even isolated backup systems with no external connectivity. A single structured message. Observation has completed first contact layer. Immediately beneath it was a second line. One that caused panic across every civilization in the fleet. Next phase, recursive observer alignment initiated. No one knew what it meant, until the fleet experienced something unprecedented. For exactly one moment, every individual aboard every ship saw Earth. Not through telescopes, not through sensors, but as if they were already there. Cities, oceans, storm systems, human lives unfolding in real time. And layered above it all, something else. A second Earth. A third. An infinite stack of overlapping versions of the same planet, each slightly different, each existing in a different layer of possibility. Dr. Saris stared at the display, her voice barely audible. "We are not the ones observing it," she said. "It is showing us what we are already part of." And somewhere in that impossible stack of realities, humanity was no longer just a species. It was a fixed point across multiple dimensional outcomes. A structure that refused to collapse into a single prediction. That was when the Galactic Council issued its highest classification alert in history. Humanity. Unresolvable entity class. Because if the anomaly was correct, then humanity was not being discovered. It was being activated. The final phase did not begin with an explosion, a war, or a declaration. It began with silence. Across the entire galaxy, every system capable of observing Earth reported the same phenomenon. No change in emissions. No new signals. No visible technological escalation. And yet, every predictive model, built from trillions of data points across thousands of civilizations, collapsed simultaneously. Not gradually. Instantly. As if a fundamental assumption had been removed from reality itself. The Galactic Science Directorate ran emergency verification protocols. Simulation clusters were restarted. Historical datasets were reloaded. Alternate models were tested. Every outcome converged on the same error. Humanity cannot be accurately simulated beyond current frame. Dr. Saris, still aboard the expedition fleet, requested a final direct observation. Against protocol. Against consensus. Against fear. A single high-resolution passive scan of Earth. The fleet complied. What they saw should have been ordinary. A blue planet. Cloud systems. Ocean currents. A familiar, primitive world at the edge of a spiral arm. But within seconds, instruments began reporting contradictions. Geological readings did not match atmospheric readings. Atmospheric readings did not match orbital mechanics. Orbital mechanics did not match gravitational models. Each layer of observation was correct internally, but incompatible with every other layer. Then the anomaly returned one final transmission. No longer fragmented across systems. No longer interpreted differently by each civilization. This time, it was unified. Every species received the exact same message. You have been observing a single projection. A pause followed. Long enough for every fleet commander, scientist, and AI across the galaxy to calculate the implications. Then the second line appeared. Humanity is not located in your dimensional frame. The expedition fleet attempted to respond. No transmission left their systems. It was as if communication itself had been folded before it could exist. And then came the final observation event. Every civilization simultaneously perceived Earth again, but not as a planet, not as a location, as a boundary condition, a fixed constraint embedded into reality's structure. Humanity was not simply existing within the universe. It was acting as an anchor point preventing certain configurations of reality from collapsing into simpler forms. Dr. Alira Madsen, back on Earth, made the final deduction from all compiled data. Her voice was recorded in the last shared scientific transmission between Earth and the Galactic Council. If higher dimensions exist, she said, then we assumed they were places we could move into. But what if they are not places at all? What if they are consequences of observation? Silence followed. Then she continued. Every civilization in the galaxy, assumed reality, is something we exist inside. But every dataset we've received suggests something else. We are not inside reality. We are interacting with its structure. The anomaly responded for the first time in a way that was not abstract, not symbolic, not geometric, but direct. Every system in existence displayed a single unified line. Humanity is the system that defines the lower bound of dimensional stability. The meaning was not immediately understood. Then the Galactic Council's oldest AI, designed to interpret paradoxes beyond standard logic, translated it. Its final output was simple. Humans are not being observed. Humans are what prevents reality from becoming undefined. And in that moment, every civilization understood the same terrifying truth. If humanity were ever removed, the universe would not end in destruction. It would end in indeterminacy. No stars, no time, no dimensions, only unresolved possibility. The fleets near the anomaly began to withdraw, not from fear of humanity, but from fear of what humanity meant. Because for the first time in galactic history, every intelligent species reached the same conclusion. They were not looking at the weakest civilization in the universe. They were orbiting the only reason the universe could be understood at all. And somewhere beyond dimensions, beyond mathematics, beyond observation itself, something that had once been called a fifth-dimensional being, finally stopped looking outward, and started listening. Not to the galaxy, not to the stars, but to Earth. Because for the first time, it realized it was not the observer. It was also being observed.